The moment I stepped onto my driveway that morning, something felt wrong. You know that unsettling silence when something is missing, but your brain hasn't caught up yet? That was me, standing frozen, staring at the empty patch of concrete where my jet ski should have been. My heart pounded. No, no, no. Just yesterday, my midnight blue Yamaha sat right there, glistening in the sun as I hosed it down, preparing for a weekend on the lake. I had worked 2 years of overtime to buy it, 2 years of missed weekends, late-night shifts, and sacrificing vacations just to own that one piece of freedom. And now, it was gone. I spun around, hoping it was just some weird trick of my tired brain. Maybe I had parked it somewhere else. But no, I had never moved it. My hands trembled as I yanked my phone from my pocket, scrolling through my photo gallery. There it was, parked exactly where I was standing just last night. Someone had stolen it. I rushed to my neighbor Marcus's house, pounding on his door. "Did you see anyone near my driveway last night?" I asked the second. He answered. He blinked at me, still in his work uniform. "Man, I've been at the factory since 7 a.m. What happened?" "My jet ski, it's gone." Marcus frowned, stepping outside to scan my driveway. "You sure it didn't get towed or something?" "Towed?" I scoffed. "Why would—" A voice interrupted me from across the street. "Looking for something?" I turned to see Linda Prescott standing in her perfectly manicured yard, watering her azaleas. Linda was the self-appointed queen of our HOA, a woman who somehow knew about every car parked an inch too close to the curb and every blade of grass taller than regulation. "My jet ski," I said, striding toward her. "It's missing." She pursed her lips, her expression a mix of fake sympathy and smug satisfaction. "Oh, that noisy thing? The HOA had it removed this morning." My stomach dropped. "What?" She set her watering can down, speaking as if she were explaining something to a child. "There's a new rule against recreational vehicles in driveways. The notice went out last week. You really should check your mail more often." The way she said it, like she was enjoying this, I felt my blood pressure spike. "You're telling me," I said, voice rising, "that the HOA stole my jet ski?" Linda gave a careless shrug. "Rules are rules. Maybe next time you'll pay closer attention." I stormed inside, grabbing the pile of unopened mail from my counter. Bills, junk mail. There was an envelope stamped with important HOA notice in bold red ink. I ripped it open, my hand shaking as I read the words. Effective immediately, all recreational vehicles, boats, and hobby equipment must be stored out of sight. Non-compliance will result in immediate enforcement and liquidation. Liquidation? I snatched my phone and scrolled to the HOA directory, pressing the number next to Gerald Thompson's name. The HOA president. He picked up on the third ring. "Thompson residence." A woman's voice answered. "This is Alex from Pine Ridge Drive. I need to speak with Gerald now." A pause, then the deep, composed voice of Gerald himself. Thompson speaking. I clenched my jaw. "Gerald, my jet ski was taken from my driveway today. Linda says the HOA ordered it removed." "Yes, Alex." The board passed an emergency bylaw amendment. It was becoming a problem. Too many eyesores in the neighborhood. "You can't just take someone's property." I shot back. Gerald sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "It's all outlined in the bylaws. Immediate enforcement was necessary to maintain property values." I felt a chill. "Fine. Where is it? I'll pick it up." Another pause. Then his voice turned smug. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean?" "It has already been liquidated," he said smoothly. "Sold at auction this morning. The proceeds covered administrative fees." The air seemed to leave my lungs. "You sold my jet ski?" "Correct." My vision blurred with rage. "You stole an $8,000 jet ski and sold it without telling me?" "It's within our rights," he said lazily. "Perhaps next time you'll pay closer attention to HOA notices." And just like that, he hung up. I stood there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Through my window, I saw Linda chatting with another neighbor, occasionally glancing at my house, her smirk never fading. The doorbell rang. A police officer stood at my doorstep, pen and notepad in hand. "Sir, you reported a theft?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Yes, my jet ski was taken from my driveway without my permission." He flipped through his notes. "Your HOA already reported that it was removed due to a bylaw violation. Technically, sir, it's not considered theft under HOA jurisdiction." "No," I interrupted. "This is not a violation. This is an organized crime." The officer hesitated. "Sir, I understand you're upset." I held up the letter. "This rule was passed 3 days ago, and they sold my jet ski this morning. You really think that's normal? Do you know how many neighbors had their property disappear in the last 2 months?" That got his attention. I pulled out a neighborhood map I had started marking up. Marcus lost his fishing boat. Jenny lost her daughter's playhouse. The Jacksons lost their canoe. Old Mr. Franklin? They took his vintage motorcycle. The officer's brows furrowed. "Wait, all in this neighborhood?" I nodded. "And you know what else? None of these people live on the fancy cul-de-sac where Gerald and his HOA board live." He scratched his head. "That does seem suspicious." Before he could say more, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Not just your jet ski. Ask around. Many of us. Meeting tomorrow. 7 p.m. Marcus's house. Come alone." I stared at the message, then looked back up at the officer. "Sir," I said, my resolve hardening, "I don't think I need to report a simple theft anymore. I think I need to report an organized crime." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty spot in my driveway. But it wasn't just about the jet ski anymore. It was about control. The HOA thought they could take whatever they wanted. They thought they could rewrite the rules whenever it suited them. Well, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Tomorrow we fight back. The next evening, I parked my car a block away from Marcus's house and walked the rest of the way, checking over my shoulder. Maybe I was paranoid, but after Gerald's smug threats, I wasn't taking chances. I knocked twice. Marcus cracked the door open, peered outside, then let me in quickly. Inside, 7 other neighbors sat around the dining room table, their faces a mix of anger and exhaustion. I recognized Jenny, whose daughter's playhouse had been taken. Frank, the retired mechanic who lost his vintage motorcycle. Rachel, who had returned from work one day to find her kid's treehouse demolished without warning. Marcus cleared his throat. "All right, everyone. This is Alex. He's the one who got the police involved." I raised my hands. "I just want my jet ski back." But after what happened, I knew I wasn't alone. Jenny nodded. "It's not just about the jet ski. It's all of us." Frank leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists. "That HOA has been running this place like a dictatorship. They pick and choose who they want to target. The ones who speak up get punished." Rachel slid a newspaper across the table. I think I found out why. I scanned the article. The headline read, "Exclusive luxury homes coming soon. Oakwood Estates Phase 2. Marcus jabbed a finger at the developer's name. "Look at that. Gerald's brother-in-law owns the company." It all clicked into place. The sudden, illegal rule changes. The removal of anything deemed an eyesore. The aggressive property seizures. They were cleaning up the neighborhood. Not for us, but for a future development project. My hands curled into fists. They're stealing from us to make their homes more valuable. Frank slammed his palm on the table. I knew it. That's why they've only been targeting certain houses. The ones on visible streets. The room fell silent. We weren't dealing with overzealous HOA board members. We were dealing with greedy opportunists running a scam. And it was time to expose them. I looked around the table. If we fight alone, they'll crush us. But together, we have a chance. Jenny hesitated. But they control everything. They have lawyers. What do we have? I took a deep breath. The law is still on our side. I've been digging through state statutes. The HOA violated at least 3 laws by seizing and selling property without a court order. Frank nodded. I don't have much left to lose. I'll fight. One by one, hands rose around the table. We had a team. Now, we needed a plan. Marcus pulled up the HOA's website. They keep minutes of their meetings online. We found it, a 12-minute emergency session where 5 people, all from Oakwood Circle, had approved the new bylaw. I laughed bitterly. 12 minutes to change the rules? That's illegal. They need at least 30 days' notice and a 25% homeowner vote. Rachel's eyes widened. So, we can prove they broke the law? I grinned. Not just that, we can take them to court. The next morning, I mailed a formal demand letter to the HOA outlining their violations and requesting the return of all stolen property plus damages. That's when things got ugly. That afternoon, I spotted Linda across the street, phone glued to her ear, glaring at my house. She was reporting me. Minutes later, a black SUV pulled up behind my car, blocking my driveway. I stepped outside, arms crossed. Gerald climbed out, flanked by 2 other board members, Patricia and Robert. Their faces were stone cold. "We understand you've been stirring up trouble," Gerald said, his voice syrupy smooth. I didn't flinch. I just want my property back. Patricia smirked. "Rules are rules, Alex." "No," I shot back. "Laws are laws." Gerald's fake smile faded. "Listen carefully. This neighborhood has certain standards. People who cause trouble often find it difficult to stay." Robert smirked. "Did you know your grass is a 1/4 inch too high? That's a violation." Patricia chimed in. "Your mailbox paint isn't the exact approved shade either. Another violation." Gerald stepped closer. "We can make your life very difficult. Alex, maybe you should reconsider your position." I gritted my teeth. "You stole my jet ski. I'm not backing down." Gerald sighed, shaking his head. "Your jet ski sold fast. Only $800. Covered the administrative fees nicely." I clenched my fists. This wasn't about property anymore. This was about power. And they had just declared war. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the coffee shop tomorrow. Alone. I have information you need." I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early, scanning the room. Then I saw her, Diane, Gerald's assistant. She sipped her coffee, eyes darting nervously before whispering, "I don't have much time." I leaned in. "What do you know?" She slid a flash drive across the table. "I copied Gerald's emails. You need to see them." I plugged the drive into my laptop later that night. My jaw dropped. Emails between Gerald, the developer, and HOA board members, explicitly planning to remove undesirable elements from a neighborhood. The worst part? They split the money from the auction-off items among themselves. I exhaled sharply. This wasn't just corruption. This was theft, fraud, organized crime. And now I had the proof. The next HOA meeting was packed. Over 50 neighbors squeezed into the community center. Gerald sat at the front, looking smug, flanked by Linda and the rest of his board. I stood. "I have something to say." Gerald checked his watch. 2 minutes. Then we move on. I raised my voice. 3 days ago, the HOA took my jet ski and sold it without proper notice. And I'm not the only one. Murmurs spread. I held up printed copies of state laws. The law requires a 30-day notice before rule change. The HOA gave us 3. Linda scoffed. The board had the right. I cut her off. And according to state property law, an HOA cannot seize personal property without a court order. A stunned silence filled the room. Then I pulled out my final card. "This," I said, holding up Diane's flash drive, "contains emails proving the board split the money from our stolen property." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Frank stood up. "They took my motorcycle." Jenny rose next. "They destroyed my kids' playhouse." One by one, neighbors stood, shouting grievances. Gerald slammed his gavel. "This meeting is adjourned." Security stepped forward. I held up my phone. "You touch me, and you'll be on the news tonight." That's when the news van pulled up outside. Gerald paled. And just like that, his reign was crumbling. The small suburban town of Willow Creek had always been a picture-perfect community. White picket fences, neatly trimmed lawns, and a sense of peace and order. For years, the homeowners had trusted their HOA to maintain the serenity, handling everything from neighborhood aesthetics to common area upkeep. But beneath the polished exterior, something dark was simmering, a secret corruption that had poisoned the HOA from the inside out. It began on an unusually warm Tuesday evening, when the community gathered for the quarterly HOA meeting. The large conference room at the local community center was packed, as it always was, but tonight the air felt different. The usual murmurs of casual complaints were replaced with whispers of anger and disbelief. Something was wrong, and everyone knew it. Paul Walker, a longtime resident and retired schoolteacher, stood up at the podium, his voice shaking but resolute. For years, we've trusted these people to take care of our community. But what we didn't know was that while we were paying our dues, they were lining their pockets. The funds that were meant for the upkeep of our homes were siphoned off, mismanaged, and misused. A collective gasp swept through the room. "I've done the math," Paul continued, pointing to a series of documents in his hand. "And I'm not the only one. Dozens of you have done the same. Our fees have gone up, but the roads are worse. The parks are falling apart, and we can't even get a fresh coat of paint on the clubhouse. Where's the money gone?" Gasps turned into murmurs of agreement. The tension in the room was palpable. "I know this isn't easy to hear," Paul said, his voice firming up, "but we've all been victims of a system that's taken advantage of us. The time for silence is over. We need answers. We need accountability. And we need to expose the truth." At the back of the room, a few of the board members shifted nervously in their seats. The head of the HOA, a woman named Karen Foster, looked uncomfortable. She was the one who had been in charge for over a decade. But now, the scrutiny was unbearable. Karen's tight smile faltered as more homeowners began to stand, demanding explanations. The once quiet room erupted into chaos. Homeowners shouting questions, their voices rising in anger. "Where's the money? How could you do this to us?" Karen attempted to regain control of the room, her voice trembling, but the damage was done. The whispers of corruption that had once seemed like mere rumors had now become undeniable facts. The community had awoken. The next morning, the local news station had caught wind of the story. Journalists arrived in Willow Creek, cameras rolling, microphones in hand. It wasn't long before the scandal began to spread like wildfire. The quiet suburban town was no longer just a quiet place to live. It had become the epicenter of a media storm. Tonight, a shocking revelation in Willow Creek, where residents are accusing their homeowners association of embezzling funds meant for neighborhood upkeep. With mounting evidence and growing outrage, the HOA board is under intense scrutiny. The news anchor's voice cut through the silence of every living room in town. Karen Foster's face appeared on the screen, but it was not a confident or controlled image. She was visibly sweating, clearly caught off guard by the media attention. As the camera zoomed in, a reporter asked, "Miss Foster, do you have an explanation for these allegations?" The board's once solid defenses were now faltering under the weight of public scrutiny. Karen's responses became more disjointed, her explanations unraveling with every passing second. The community, now armed with evidence and a thirst for justice, wasn't going to let her or her fellow board members off easily. Over the next few days, more homeowners came forward, willing to speak to the press, to share their stories of how they had been misled and mistreated by the HOA. Neighbors who had once been quiet and compliant were now united in their cause. Paul Walker, once an ordinary retiree, became the face of this movement, leading rallies and interviews with the media, demanding justice for his community. The local news was relentless, interviewing more residents, showing the dilapidated conditions of the neighborhood, and reporting the financial discrepancies. With each news story, the pressure on the HOA board grew heavier, their defense crumbling under the spotlight. The media's exposure was just the beginning. As the public outcry grew louder, legal action became inevitable. The homeowners hired a lawyer, Sarah Johnson, a fierce advocate known for her no-nonsense approach. She reviewed the evidence, connected the dots, and filed a lawsuit against the HOA on behalf of the residents. The case was set for trial, and the courtroom was packed. Homeowners, reporters, and even some curious bystanders filled the seats, eager to witness the showdown. In the witness stand, Sarah was calm and determined. The evidence we have is irrefutable. We have financial records showing where the HOA funds went, into personal accounts, into projects that were never completed, and into contracts with companies owned by board members themselves. The judge, a stern man named Judge Harold Thompson, leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the defense. You're telling me that none of you knew what was happening with these funds? None of you questioned where this money went? The defense attorney, a slick corporate lawyer hired by the HOA, stammered. Your Honor, this is all a misunderstanding. The funds were, well, there were accounting errors, and... Sarah cut him off. Accounting errors? She held up a set of documents for the entire courtroom to see. These aren't errors, Mr. Jacobs. These are deliberate actions to misappropriate funds, actions that have affected every homeowner here. Then, the key witness stepped forward, Mrs. Evelyn Harper, a longtime HOA employee who had been working for the association until she was abruptly let go. She had witnessed firsthand how funds were misallocated and how the board members took kickbacks from contractors. Her testimony was damning. I tried to speak up, Evelyn said, her voice quivering. But every time I did, I was silenced. I saw them take money from a fund and use it to renovate their own homes. I saw them approve contracts that benefited only their friends and family. It was wrong, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Evelyn's words echoed through the room. The defense had no response. The board members who had once sat with smug expressions now looked defeated, their eyes cast downward. The evidence had been laid bare, and there was no denying the truth. The defense crumbled, and the case was all but won. Days later, the verdict came down. Judge Thompson had seen enough. The court has found that the Willow Creek Homeowners Association acted unlawfully and with gross negligence. The actions of the board members were deliberate, and their misuse of funds has caused significant harm to the community. The crowd in the courtroom erupted into applause. Karen Foster, along with the other board members, is hereby removed from their positions. All funds that were misappropriated must be returned to the residents, with full compensation for damages incurred. Furthermore, an investigation into the missing funds will be initiated immediately. Karen's face drained of color as she stood up, flanked by her fellow board members. The room had become a courtroom of triumph for the residents of Willow Creek. Paul Walker, who had once been an ordinary man, now stood tall as a symbol of victory. Thank you, Paul said, his voice cracking with emotion as he turned to Sarah. You did it. We did it. The residents of Willow Creek had prevailed, and justice had been served. In the weeks that followed, the community began to heal. The corrupt board members were gone, their homes stripped of the ill-gotten renovations they had once flaunted. Neighbors who had once been divided by apathy were now united in a common cause, restoring the integrity of their community. The damaged roads were repaved, the parks were cleaned, and the clubhouse was given a fresh coat of paint. But more than that, a new sense of pride and unity had emerged. The residents of Willow Creek had learned a valuable lesson. They had the power to change things. No longer would they sit idly by while those in power took advantage of them. The community had risen, and they had reclaimed their home. As Paul watched his neighbors work together to rebuild their once beautiful neighborhood, he knew the battle had been hard fought, but the victory was sweeter than anything he could have imagined. Willow Creek was no longer just a neighborhood. It was a symbol of what could happen when people stood together against corruption. Unity had triumphed, and in the end, it was a community that had won. And